Hello everyone. Pray. We will learn about the 5 preventions and operational procedures of high voltage switchgear. Through this lesson, you need to master the 5 prevention aspects of high voltage switchgear and the operational procedures, thereby acquiring the ability to operate high voltage switchgear. Cultivating good electricity, safety awareness, standardized practices, and teamwork skills. The teaching focus and challenges of this lesson are the 5 prevention aspects of high voltage switchgear and the operational procedures. From previous lessons, we have learned that high voltage switchgear is equipment supplied as a complete set by the manufacturer. After being delivered to the site, it is assembled into a high-voltage power distribution device. When operating high-voltage switchgear, the following 5 principles must be adhered to, abbreviated as the 5 preventions of high-voltage switchgear. They mainly include the following: preventing incorrect opening or closing of the circuit breaker. For example, when the vacuum circuit breaker inside the high voltage switchgear is in the working and closed state, it will be impossible to withdraw the card circuit breaker from its working position. Preventing moving the circuit breaker card under load. When the vacuum circuit breaker card inside the high voltage switchgear is closed in the test position, the circuit breaker card cannot enter the working position. Preventing closing the grounding switch while energized. When the vacuum circuit breaker card inside the high voltage switchgear is in the working position and closed, the grounding switch cannot be closed. Preventing closing the circuit breaker or disconnecting switch with the grounding switch closed. When the grounding switch inside the high voltage switchgear is closed, the circuit breaker card cannot be closed. 5. Preventing entering a live compartment by mistake. When the grounding switch inside the high voltage switchgear is open, the rotating rod locks the rear door of the switchgear, preventing the rear door from being opened. At the same time, when the rear door is opened, the grounding switch rotating rod is locked, making it impossible to open the grounding switch. Next, let's watch a video clip about incorrectly opening a circuit breaker. At a 220 kV substation operation site of a power supply bureau, maintenance personnel were conducting automation device testing work. We can proceed with the automation device testing now. Okay, let me give Zhao Zhang a call. Hello, is this Zhao Zhang? We need your cooperation now to perform remote control testing on the 101 circuit breaker on the medium voltage side of number 1 main transformer. Please make preparations on your end. Alright, no problem. Old Zhu isn't here. Fortunately, I know his password, otherwise I wouldn't be able to operate it. On-site operating personnel, without supervision, removed the power protection warning sign without authorization, entered the wrong bay, used someone else's password, and performed an unauthorized unlock operation. Not long after the main control room called, what happened? The 102T suspension substation on your side has lost all power. Oh no, due to Jing's unauthorized use of another person's password, the circuit breaker was incorrectly opened, causing a complete power outage at the related substation. From the video, we can see that only by adhering to the above operational principles can high-voltage switchgear operate safely and reliance-wise. Unpredictable consequences may occur. So how should high-voltage switchgear be operated? When energizing high-voltage switchgear, the following steps must be followed. Close all rear doors and rear cover plates and lock them. The grounding switch must be in the closed position before the rear door can be closed. The rear door can only be closed when the grounding switch is closed. Insert the grounding switch operating handle into the hexagonal hole at the lower right side of the middle door and rotate counterclockwise to set the grounding switch to the open position. The interlock plate at the operating hole automatically springs back, covering the operating hole. The lower door is locked. Push the circuit breaker card into position. Then push the circuit breaker card into the cabinet, positioning it at the designated location. Manually insert the secondary plug and close the card compartment door. Insert the circuit breaker card crank into the crank socket and rotate the crank clockwise until the crank is clearly and a clicking sound is heard. Remove the crank. At this point, the card is in the working position. The secondary plug is locked, and the main circuit of the circuit breaker card is connected. Check the relevant signals. Operate the open/close transfer switch on the instrument panel to close the circuit breaker and energize it. At the same time, the green light on the instrument panel turns off, and the red light turns on, indicating successful closing. Having learned how to energize, how do we perform de-energization? Next, let's learn about the de-energization steps. For high-voltage switchgear, operate the open/close transfer switch on the instrument panel to set the circuit breaker to the open position. At the same time, the red light on the instrument panel turns off and the green light turns on, indicating successful opening. Insert the circuit breaker card crank into the crank socket and rotate the crank clockwise about 20 turns until the crank is clearly and a clicking sound is heard. Remove the crank. At this point, the card is in the test position. The secondary plug lock is released. Open the card compartment door and manually disconnect the secondary plug. The main circuit of the card is disconnected. Push the service card into position and lock it. Pull the card out onto the service card, and after securing it, move the service card away. Observe the voltage indicator or perform a voltage test. If no voltage is present, you can proceed with the operation. Insert the grounding switch operating handle into the hexagonal hole at the lower right side of the middle door and rotate clockwise to set the grounding switch to the closed position. After confirming that the grounding switch is indeed closed, open the lower door of the switchgear. Maintenance personnel can then enter for maintenance and repair work. Having learned the energization and de-energization procedures for high-voltage switchgear, it must be emphasized that before operating, always follow the operational principles, fill out the work ticket, wear protective equipment, and ensure clear team 分工, division of labor, before proceeding with the operation. Never work alone. It is required to emphasize safety, awareness, and teamwork. This lesson mainly covered the 5 prevention aspects of high-voltage switchgear and the operational procedures. Please use your spare time to complete the after-class tasks in group discussions. That is all for this lesson. Thank you for listening.